Game of Thrones creators David Benioff and Dan Weiss, who are supposed to move into Star Wars following the conclusion of season 7 of Game of Thrones, are now talking about what went wrong with their transition to Star Wars and who they are putting the blame on. Before we get into this, I'd like to ask you, please hit that subscribe button, hit that bell for notifications so you don't miss any of our future videos here at the Trent Report. Let's get into this right here. But before we get to what they said recently, let's kind of give you some backstory on what exactly happened with them and their time with Star Wars. It was announced back in 2018 that they would be creating a number of Star Wars projects. They said in a joint statement at the time, in the summer of 1977, we traveled to a galaxy far, far away, and we've been dreaming of it ever since. We are honored by the opportunity, a little terrified by the responsibility, and so excited to get started as soon as the final season of Game of Thrones is complete. Lucasfilm President Kathleen Kennedy would provide an update in 2019 saying, as they finish Game of Thrones, they're going to segue into Star Wars. They're working very closely with Rian Johnson. And then by October 2019, it was all over, and they announced their exit from Star Wars and Lucasfilm. They said, we love Star Wars. When George Lucas built it, he built us too. Getting to talk about Star Wars with him and the current Star Wars team was the thrill of a lifetime, and we will always be indebted to the saga that changed everything. There are only so many hours in the day, and we felt we could not do justice to both Star Wars and our Netflix projects, so we are regretfully stepping away. Well, it doesn't look like that was the actual narrative, is because they are now saying that it wasn't about them not being able to do both Star Wars and their Netflix projects at the same time. In fact, this is what they told the Hollywood Reporter. They first explained what their idea was. They said, we wanted to do the first Jedi, basically how the Jedi Order came to be, why it came to be, the first lightsaber, etc. That is what Benioff said. And then Weiss added dryly, I'm not sure if that means sarcasm or what, or if he's like deadpanning or he's trying to like crack a joke or whatever. But the fact that he's even saying this and he knows he's saying it to the Hollywood Reporter, so it's going to go into print, I think is telling. Even with the Hollywood Reporter adding this kind of addendum to it that Rian Johnson is their longtime friend. But anyways, Weiss said, and we were annoyed as hell when Rian Johnson called his movie The Last Jedi. He completely destroyed the obvious title for what we were working on. So I don't know if they're being tongue in cheek there or what, but the fact that they're actually saying it, I think, is basically memeing it into existence and kind of is just going to confirm what a lot of people think, anyways. That Rian Johnson basically destroyed the Star Wars franchise single-handedly with the Last Jedi film. I do think that it's just more than Rian Johnson. I think the whole Disney Star Wars trilogy was doomed from the get-go. If you listen to the comments that Kathleen Kennedy made in 2015 at the Fortune magazine conference that she appeared at, where she said she was going to be injecting feminism into the franchise. And then obviously you see that in The Force Awakens and how derivative that film was. Even George Lucas thought it was disgusting, and he described the Walt Disney Company as white slavers in like a 60 Minutes interview. So it was pretty much doomed already before Rian Johnson, and I think Rian Johnson just kind of put the death knell on it with how absolutely terrible his film was and how it disregarded the Star Wars history, Star Wars canon, how the Force works, how the characters work. He disrespected Luke Skywalker. He disrespected the dark side of the Force. He disrespected the light side of the Force. It was just an absolutely terrible film on all fronts. He doesn't understand how battles in space work, et cetera, with the stupid Holdo maneuver. So to a T, I think you can say that his film was the death knell, but it was obviously had it got made, right? Lucasfilm created it. It was greenlit by Kathleen Kennedy. She chose Rian Johnson. She knew exactly what he was doing, and the people at Lucasfilm and Disney knew that as well. So again, like I said, obviously you can put a lot of blame on Rian Johnson, but there were things that led up to that we already saw massive red flags and that it was already on the decline. But when asked what went wrong at Lucasfilm, specifically with their project, with their Star Wars project, it was supposed to be multiple projects. Benioff said Lucasfilm ended up not wanting to do a first Jedi story. We had a very specific story idea in mind, and ultimately they decided they didn't want to do that. And we totally get it. It's their company and their IP, but we weren't the droids they were looking for. So it had nothing to do with them balancing their time between Star Wars and Netflix. It had everything to do with the fact that I guess Lucasfilm didn't want to do this first Jedi story that they had pitched them, which really doesn't make any sense either, given the fact that Lucasfilm announced that they would be joining Star Wars and were developing this film seemingly alongside Lucasfilm at the time. So That just seems bizarre, and it's even more bizarre when you get this uh, at Star Wars Celebration last year when they announced that James Mangold would be telling a movie that, quote, will take audiences deep into the past, telling the tale of the first Jedi to wield the Force and harness it as a liberating power in an era of chaos and oppression. So the idea that Lucasfilm didn't want that story, yet they announced that they are going to be doing that story just last year, doesn't really add up at all. Maybe it's possible that they were going to have the first Jedi be a male, and that's really what the problem was. I don't know, but I don't think any of this really adds up at all. It sounds like they're just trying to distance themselves from everything, put the blame on stuff. I'm not really believing what they're saying. The evidence just doesn't make me think that they're telling the truth. And there's probably a lot of other things that were going on as to why they were why their Star Wars film didn't get made. Probably had a lot to do with the fact that Game of Thrones season 7 or whatever it was, the last one, I can't even keep track, was an absolute disaster. The storytelling was atrocious. The idea that they wanted to do their Confederate HBO show that got scrapped. They basically became persona non grata and have been in hiding since Game of Thrones, even season 7. I feel like they haven't really done anything since then. And I probably think that has a lot to do with why Lucasfilm decided to distance themselves from them, given the fact that they were no longer a hot commodity and their storytelling was under the microscope. That's probably what I think had a lot to do with it. We also know that Kathleen Kennedy has had numerous problems managing talent. She's driven a number of creators away from Star Wars. You only have to look at what happened with Rogue One and what happened with Solo, a Star Wars story, and how directors were replaced, films were recut, things were hobbled together. And then just look at how she handled the Disney Star Wars trilogy, basically trying to put it together piecemeal instead of actually having a well thought out and well crafted story that would span over 3 films. So complete and utter disaster on her and on the management perspective. So it's possible that there was something going along on that lines as well, that she was just not handling them as talent very well. So that is what David Benioff and David Weiss, or Dan Weiss, David Benioff and Dan Weiss had to say about Star Wars. Let me know what you guys make what they have to say in the comments below. Remember to always be charitable, but to always speak the truth.